Keeping the Flow podcast, hosted by Jason and Chad.
All right, welcome back. I'm one of the hosts, Jason Upton, and I'm excited today to kick things off with none other than our very own co-host, Chad Johnson, a true veteran in the waterworks industry and our very first guest. We shot another one of these, we aired one of these episodes, which would be actually the first episode, and we were trying to get the kinks worked out and try to see how things work. So this is actually our first interview and our first interviewing episode. So we'll get right with it. With over 25 years in the industry, Chad has done it all from inside sales and field work to managing teams and navigating the unique challenges utilities, contractors, and vendors face every day. He brings unmatched experience, a practical mindset, and let's be honest, a whole lot of personality. A graduate of Northern Illinois University with a degree in psychology, Chad's strengths lie in connecting with people, solving problems, and keeping it real. Whether he's in the field, the office, or on this mic, Chad is working every day to help benefit municipals and bring his experience into the industry. In today's episode, we're talking about asset management with a special focus on water towers. So, Chad, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do and asset management.
Yeah, great. Well, you made me sound a lot better than I probably am, Jason. So I really appreciate that. um, you're right. I do bring a lot of personality, and hopefully, I will contribute to the show in positive ways. And it looks like I'm the first guinea pig, so we'll work out the kinks here and at least have something to show our future guests as well and how we operate. But yes, I've been in the industry 25 years now. Started in sales and inside sales. So learning customers, learning the business, and then moved around a little bit. I worked for a chlorination company, did a lot of training, been in a lot of I got real dirty for a while. Been in 4-degree weather, um, ice frozen on your jacket. Until you experience that, you don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, I've had some experiences that I will never ever um, forget, and I'm glad that I had them. So it helps me in the industry, and it helps me relate to people that work hard every day in this industry. And I have a lot of respect for those people. So I love when I see some Facebook entries or some LinkedIn entries to see here's your utility at work, and it's nobody wants to be outside in the water. I tell you that when it's negative 25 in the Chicagoland area in Northern Illinois. So yeah, try my best to bring a new perspective and in the traditional ways of doing business, and that is asset management. So that's what I'm working on now, and helping municipalities lower life cycle costs on water tower maintenance and repairs. So that's a total all-in cost. What from cradle to grave. What's it going to cost you as far as So if you think about it, if you bought a
What
house.
is asset management,
Yeah.
Chad? What?
So it's essentially kind of just like it sounds. So how do you manage the day-to-day operations of assets? And that's being proactive. So you wouldn't let your car engine go to fail. You would change the oil, right? So that's being proactive. That's doing the necessary maintenance in order to keep your car running. So that's kind of what the asset management part is keeping up with repairs and keeping ahead of future costs. And uh, you know, you wouldn't, when you buy a house, that's the cost of the house. But what happens if the water heater goes out? What happens if your furnace fails? What happens when you need to buy a new fridge? Those are all costs associated with that asset. It's the same thing with water towers. Coatings cost money, repairs cost money, water quality costs money, and compliance costs money, and safety definitely costs money. So that's all incorporated into the asset management plan that we help develop and implement for municipalities.
So if I had, I was wanting to better manage my assets in my city, uh, what what would I be like? And I have, say, I have a water tower, and I call up Chad Johnson. I say, hey, I want to, I want to do better at managing and being more proactive on my water tower. What would you tell me?
Well, first I would ask you what your plan is currently. So if you don't have a plan, I mean, and I'm not saying you would or wouldn't. I just ask you what your plan is, and
And probably
um,
most of the time you hear everybody has a plan. I've always got a plan, right?
absolutely,
But then
absolutely.
when you start reviewing the plan, it's really nothing more than a note on
Yeah.
a paper.
Right. Or the water tower's still standing, we're good. So that's all part of it. Yeah, but everybody has a plan. You're right. And then so I have to fit into that. So where um you have options. So either plan A or plan B, weigh your options and see what plan comes out better and better for you. And that's where you have the options. And you're right, Jason. Um, even when I went into Rock Island, you guys had a plan, and for full disclosure, Rock Island is under our program and under our help for maintenance. So the plan was, hey, whenever our engineering team decides to put on the capital plan and run out to bid and get a coating on it, that's what we're gonna do. Well, and
And
so
unfortunately, that's why I did reach out to you because our plan, although we thought we were doing a good job, once you guys came in and gave us an assessment, which is the first part of and and working with you is getting an assessment of what we're working with. Once I seen the assessment, I was like, wow, we've kind of failed on a couple things, not things that aren't correctable and things that are can't be fixed, but things that we don't see. I think we one of the main things is I'm not a climber. I'm not necessarily scared of heights, but some of these, water towers are pretty up there. And so I'm not going up there and inspecting the water tower. A lot of my guys, to go up on a water tower anymore, you have to be trained, have to have special training. So unless we have that special training, we're probably not going up on top of the water tower. So, you know, assessing what our tower was a big part of that initially, and also selling the fact that, hey, you guys need to do a better job taking care of some stuff. And like I said, I was under the impression that we were doing a pretty good job. They looked good from the outside, from standing back, everything looked good. Check my vents, everything that I could see down low looked good. But I'm not a professional in assessing that, and so that's where we called you in and said, hey, can you help us out?
right. And I'll tell you, guess what? I'm not a professional inspector either, but our team is full of them. So we brought in the right people in order to do that and then develop the plan. So part of the asset management plan too is knowing what your current condition is and what it should be, and then having the funding to back it up. So things cost money, and those inspections cost money, and you need a third party to do that for you. So that's where we start rolling in the all-encompassing asset management plan. Who's going to do what and when, and how is it going to be funded, and where what does that look like in a long-term plan. So um, that's part of the asset management series. And then um, you know asset management goes all the way down to a trash pump that you have waiting to pump out water when there's a water main break. The four-letter word in the water industry, water main break, right?
Yeah, way to go!
Yeah.
You said it, not me.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everybody always
And
laughs. Sometimes I'll be teaching class and I'll be like, those things that squirt water in the road, or the things that flood driveways.
mhm,
Yeah, I never like to say that, but it's true. All infrastructures kind of as part of an asset within
yeah,
your municipality.
right. And if you're not testing those pumps on a regular basis to make sure they work, they're not going to work when you need them. And that 4-inch pump could save a life. So you got to throw it in the hole real quick or whatever, and start pumping out water. You got to make sure that those assets are working, and it doesn't cost that much money. You know.
So, and you said the magic word there, money,
Yeah.
and budgets. Uh, can you maybe talk a little bit about how, you know, um, planning out your asset, your repairs, or what you can do to help manage that budget as a CIP project, or how municipals put that in their budget so they can afford uh, repairs or maintenance on their assets.
Yeah, so basically how that works is you have a long-term plan that includes services for engineering, inspection, emergency services, safety and compliance issues, and then also future coatings inside and out. So um, you could, I don't know, I don't know exactly how the algorithm works as far as the internals with our company. It's probably, classified information. So, um, it's best I don't know. I do know that basically we're going to project out what costs are going to be 12 to 15 years from now. If you started today, if we painted the tank today, an aggregate of what that would cost, all included 15 or 12 to 15 years from now. So it's kind of like a breakdown or split costs from now until 15 years from now, and then beyond. So um, it's it's a projection out, so you know exactly what your costs are going to be, instead of the traditional methods of, hey, our tank needs something, we have to hire somebody and then run it out to a bid market, and hopefully it comes in on our budget. And if it doesn't, it's an overrun, or if you did have the foresight to say, well, we need to put a certain amount of money away into an account, typically that will still be underfunded. So you don't really know what you're getting into in the future as well. So, and there's also no guarantees. So how do you fund for guarantees? So if your warranty is 1 year and you have a problem on day 366, and this has happened, you need another paint job. So how do you fund for that? Well, how we do it is we take on all the risk and we guarantee that coating. So if on day 366 you have an issue, we're coming back and we're going to repaint it. So that's what's included in your maintenance fee.
What um what are some of the common things that you see, um, you know, that are, I'm not going to say neglected, but some things that get overlooked? Is there any important things that get overlooked, maybe as a maintenance item, um, like that I would overlook if if I'm doing my own inspections and I said, hey, I got a plan already. Uh, what are some things that I might not see that your team would be able to pick up on?
One of the biggest things is safety and compliance. The biggest thing. Um, there, I would say 95% of the tanks that I inspect or have inspected are not OSHA compliant, um, and there's safety issues on that tank. That is the biggest one.
Things
To give
like
you
ladders.
ladders, so there's cable climbs that are not on the tank, so that's the current standard. So most of them are rail climbs. So what that means is, you put basically when you put your harness on, you strap this thing on. It has wheels on it, and it's supposed to act like a seatbelt. And as soon as you fall, it's supposed to stop you, right? The problem with those is they're one directional. So if you put them on upside down, you're not going to stop. You're just going to keep on going. So
Nice.
that's,
That'd be a heck of a ride.
yeah, until you stop. Yes, and then ladder cages, um, uh, they have been deemed to be more like a shredder on the way down. So I don't know what's worse, um, lopping off some limbs on the way down or just hitting the ground in a full piece. I'm not sure. I mean, I've never done it, so that's part of that. And a lot of ladder safety. It's a lot of ladders, and if you don't take in consideration the safety compliance issues, and there is an issue on your tower or your tank, and somebody were to get hurt, or even worse, pass away, that is a huge liability issue. And just to spend the money just on the safety issues alone, just getting your tank up to compliance, could save you millions of dollars and lives, which is more important. So those are just things to consider, um, and things that that are on older tanks that need to be fixed and addressed. And we do that as well. We make sure that it's up to code.
And the first step is the assessment. So if I got a hold of you and said, "Hey, we're thinking about putting these on
Yeah.
some kind of preventative maintenance plan moving forward," the first thing you do is come out and do an assessment.
Yeah. Yep. So we have to have a baseline. Where are we going to start? And that is essentially that to get the ball rolling, we need to know exactly what your tank needs, the plan moving forward, and that's where we collaborate and say, well, how many times can you shut this tank down? Can you isolate the tank? So what does that involve? Um, can how many times do you want to do you think you need a washout? Is your water quality good? Um, how far do you want to spread costs? We can work within your budget to make sure that we can spread costs out, to fit into that. And also, do you want ROV inspections, or do you want chemical cleans, or there's plenty of things that we can do in order to meet your needs on what that entails. And do you need a mixer? Mixers are a big deal, especially in Northern Illinois with cold weather and water quality. Um, and just building that plan to fit the needs is the most important part of after the inspection. But to get the ball rolling, we need to know exactly where we stand.
I think one of the things there that you said that was pretty important is a baseline. That's one thing that when I talk to people, a lot of times when we start talking about maintenance, the first thing is having a baseline, because I can go in there and I can call in somebody, say on a pump, and I can say, hey, can you give me a vibration test, see how the bearings and see how the motor's functioning. Um, but they can give me a a vibration test, but I really don't have a baseline. Same with like a well pump. If we're talking, well, treating well water, like the pumps that are in a well, it's always good to have a baseline. Like, what did you start with? That new pump, because by the time you start maybe detecting that there's a problem, now what are you comparing it to? So, getting early on maintenance, part of that, excuse me, part of getting in early on a maintenance program is coming up with that baseline so that you know where you start, so you know how far, something is into before before it fails.
Right. So a good example of that is, um, we did an inspection in a city 4 years ago, and they decided not to move for whatever reason. It's every reason under the sun. Mainly funding though. So they need a funding plan, or there's help out there. And and what I'm excited about is talking more about funding options. What's out there for municipalities. You can't always afford everything. We help mitigate some of that with more affordable costs by cost spreading, but they opted not to. And then we did an inspection inside. So inside is also really important. Ground storage tanks with rafters. We came back 3 years later, and two of them are in the water, so they completely fell off. So we started with a baseline. Now we showed them, hey, this is what happens when you don't stay on top of this stuff. They don't last forever, and rafters are pretty important on the roof because you can't really walk on the roof if there's no rafters. So
So
that's part of it.
so now you've gave us an assessment. We kind of know what the problems is. Now I got to take it to my council. I can tell you what my answer is. The proof. A lot of times in getting council members or city officials to agree on, hey, let's work on this, let's get this done. Is that assessment? Um, Having the pictures and the information, like, hey, here's where we need to start paying attention to this. We need to get in this plan so that moving forward, hopefully it can save us money. We can stretch it out in our CIP. If we got a 5-year CIP plan, you can kind of budget, what projects you're going to do throughout that 5 years, which is helpful. And then, uh, working into that plan would be your washouts and making sure that we're staying ahead of ahead of the game. So
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you need to get more people involved, and I've been with this company for 3 years and haven't had to have this much process or this much buy-in, we'll say in the industry terms for the program, because it is completely different, especially for procurement and building a plan. We want to make sure everybody's involved. So we had a couple meetings um, you know, with internal people as well before we went to council to make sure that everybody was on board of what's going on to to take it to the next level. So that also needs to happen. This isn't a fast process. This isn't a you know a used car sale. This is a
yeah,
fully built out plan. And in some cases, hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in decisions to make sure that this is the right thing and how can we make it the best option um, that you're comfortable with. So it takes a little bit of work. It does.
one thing we hadn't really even touched on either, and it just came to me. Uh, a lot of times when you go into a city, here in most of your infrastructure is underground, so people don't realize how bad your infrastructure could be or the problems that exist with underground your infrastructure. But when you go into a town, if they have an elevated tank, that's the first thing that you usually notice. I know I don't think it's just because I'm a water guy. I always notice those when you're on the interstate, when you're driving by, when you come through a town. Usually, the first thing I look at is the water tower and be like, "Oh, that thing needs to have some care," or I need to, I wonder what the water tastes like if the water tower looks like that. So it is
Yeah.
a very real when you look at a water tower that's kind of, in disrepair and you think, I wonder if their water tastes as good as their tower looks.
Yeah. Do you ever notice how every town's named after the water tower, Jason? Do you ever notice that? It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen some pretty unique? What's the most unique water tower you've seen?
So there's lots of them, um, and some of them have houses built around them. There's a restaurant in one of them. These are all in Europe, really. They have some restaurants built in the water tower. Um, but one of my favorites that we've done is you can look it up, but it's the Dum Dum tank in Ohio. So the Dum Dum factory wanted us to redo the tower, and we painted Dum Dums on it. So all the stem, it's a legged tank, and all the stems are the sticks and things like that. That's a really cool tower to look at. But some of the more unique ones, actually are functional rather than just with water in them. They actually have things around them. So there's some pretty cool ones.
So moving to there we could probably talk about different aspects of water tower, and one of them that another one that we didn't really touch on is leasing, cellular leases on water towers. That's probably a topic that we should even maybe try to schedule in sometime. How do you deal with all these companies that are wanting to put stuff on your water tower, because it's our water tower, that provides a service to the people. Not saying that self-service doesn't as well, but that's what's housing our water that's going to the residents. So um you know it it's up to us to set the rules as to what those guys are doing on the water towers, and sometimes that gets, what they're paying to put their stuff on our water towers. Sometimes we forget about the fact that they're not always doing things correctly on that. um we're not we're excited about the amount of money that we're going to get for leasing a part of our water tower, but we're kind of forgetting about, well, are they putting the wires up right? Are they crowding the ladders, or are they welding? I've seen stuff where they've welded directly on a water tower, So who's following up and checking to make sure they're put that stuff on there right?
No, so that's a great question, and I am famous for saying, antenna or cellular wireless carriers are really good at putting up antennas, but they're not really good at looking after your water tower. So they've ran coax cables up ladders. You could barely go up them, all up in the landing and the catwalks. There's wires and coax everywhere. I've seen coax come out of the hatch, not even able to close. So there's tons of things that need to be looked after. And you're right, welding directly onto the tank. Um, the thing about paint is you can burn it off. So it might look good on the top, but you look inside the water tower and you can see exactly where they welded, and those are just points of corrosion. So um, very, very good at, like I said, putting up the antennas, but not very good at looking after your tower. So we have that service as well. Um, we make sure that the drawings are correct. Structural integrity is there, so through a structural analysis, we view all of their plans and their documents to make sure that what they're going to do is correct, and then we hold them to it. So once they're done, we do a post construction inspection and make sure everything was good, and they're responsible for any damage. So it's basically an insurance or assurance that they'll do a good job and make sure that your tower is protected and still get the money for it. So you wouldn't rent your house to somebody that's gonna tear up the carpet and um, you know put holes in the wall and for a monthly fee. Yeah, the monthly fee is great, but if it costs you too much to fix everything when they're done, then it's really not worth it. So once you're on our management plan, we want to make sure that in the future, when we're ready to overcoat it again, that we can overcoat around their antennas or have them in such a place where they'll be out of the way, or we can, if there's a lot of them, we can shut them down in sections or something, because we don't want them to come back and have to take everything off. And I know, if you don't know, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for a cellular company to come out and take out their antennas and
Yeah.
relocate them for however long. So they're not interested in doing that either. So they like to work with us and make sure, hey, yeah, this is how it needs to be done. It's a little work up front, but 12, 15 years from now, they'll probably switch things out 15 times, and then that's fine too. But they're gonna do it the right way. That's what we're gonna hold them to.
Yeah, so currently we started painting one. It kind of got cold. We weren't able to finish because we had some more maintenance items on one of our towers. We got another one that we're going to start redoing this spring, and the biggest thing there was coordination with getting all that stuff off the tower too before you
Yeah,
guys do a maintenance project like that.
yeah,
And so knowing what's up there, who owns, you know, I'll be honest, that was one of my biggest complaints is like we kind of lost track because once these folks get up on your water towers, they just kind of keep adding and they're constantly upgrading. So you kind of lose track of who's up. You don't lose track of who's up there. You lose track of what equipment the different companies have up there. Because sometimes they'll do an upgrade, they may not take their old stuff down. So, you know, sometimes a good uh, rehab is good so that you can kind of start over fresh. And that's
yeah.
kind of what we're doing as well is we're starting over fresh. We know who's going to be putting their stuff back on. And the other thing that I thought was real important that you mentioned, I heard you mention too, was that structural analysis also to be considered when you're talking about you know equipment up on your water tower is making sure can the legs structurally support, can they support the weight of the water of a heavy steel tank? And now you wouldn't think, there would be too much added by an antenna, but some of that equipment can get pretty heavy up there.
Sure. And the main thing too is they put a lot of that stuff on the railings. If you don't know anything about railings, well, they're only made to stop a human body from going over the side, so it's not like they can handle thousands of pounds of load. and those antennas can weigh up to 300-400 pounds a piece. So they got to make sure that what they're doing is correct. So we want to um, you know, get to that process and make sure that it is done. And uh, and to your point, um, yeah, who's on your tower? I mean, daisy chains I see, and there's like 15 locks all together, and they just come and go as they please. I mean, that's not right either. So we have one lock, one key. I know your process is a little bit different. You have to get checked in and everything. I mean, that's fine too. Just to make sure who is on your tank site. And really, it's hard to trust anybody anymore, really. So we help with that as well, as much as we can. So if there's one key in and one key out, they got to check it in and check it out. That's fine too. Who's on there.
Yeah. How often? I kind of know the answer, but how often should a municipality have their towers inspected?
So there is no, let's say, there's no like law. Okay, it's recommendations. So everybody is going by AWWA. They should have their tanks cleaned at least every 5 years and inspected every 3 to 5 years. So um, we have found that corrosion happens a lot faster than 3 to 5 years, especially when it started. So we're on the tank every year somehow. We're doing a visual inspection, we're washing it out, doing an ROB inspection, something to make sure that we are the mitigators of corrosion. Um, so this is where we can get into a debate about cathodic protection. I'm not an expert at cathodic protection. I know how it works. I'm a debutante, just enough to know to be
Do
dangerous.
you
But
do you have a do you have a feeling one way or another on cathodic protection?
yeah, well, I'll tell you this, just from my experience, if you put cathodic protection in a tank and you don't have the proper mixing and or ventilation, you can open that hatch and see corrosion everywhere on the top of the tank. So I guess, and then I'll think about this too, and I'm just a layman, right? I'm just a guy. I do know that the Titanic has been under the sea for about 100 years, and it hasn't corroded away yet. I mean, it's still full of like plankton and stuff, right? Like coral or whatever, whatever's growing on there, crustaceans. But
Yeah.
it hasn't corroded. It hasn't turned to dust. So anything under the water, nice cool water that's not exposed to oxygen, doesn't really corrode, and that's where the cathodic protection stands. I'm sure we'll probably get some blowback on this, which is fine. But all I know is the bottom of the tank isn't going to corrode. The top of the tank does. So that's where the rafters are. That's where some of the spindles are, and different things to hold that tank together. And I can show you dozens of pictures where the bottom looks great, the top does not. And basically, what happens is um, when chlorine um, dissipates and hits oxygen, it creates hydrochloric acid, and it sits on the top of the headspace of the tank. And if it's not ventilated correctly, it's just going to sit up there, and it's going to corrode away the top of the tank. And cathodic protection cannot do that. So who's going to do it? Well,
Yeah.
we are going to do that, and we're going to guarantee the coatings, or we're going to, when we wash it out, if we see any corrosion it's getting out of hand, we're going to fix it. We're going to coat it over and keep it good.
And you said vented properly. It kind of made me laugh only because, when we had that assessment done of ours, the tank that actually is getting rehabilitated right now, um, the one thing was the vent up on top had been painted over,
Right.
like the vent holes were reduced.
Yeah.
So like I'm only putting out there the fact that if you would have a water main break, if you were to have a water main break, I've already said it, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And the water left the tower in a hurry, you couldn't replace the water that's leaving fast enough because of the vent. to let the air in to take up that space. So that was really concerning to me when you guys brought that forward of like, oh my gosh, we need to get that corrected right away because I
Yeah.
don't want to have a collapsing our water tower.
No, so the easiest way to explain that or show it, visually is if you took a 2-liter bottle of water, fill it up, and then dumped it just like this, right? It's gonna glug. It's gotta breathe. So if you don't have a hole in the top for that just to pass right through, your water tower will do the same thing. It will glug, and it doesn't take much for that to damage or dent water towers. And in space, in the space coast where they launch rockets, they have a water tower there to cool down the site and everything because there's it's, I don't know, a couple of thousand degrees or whatever. Um, and you don't see smoke, you see steam because they're blowing water on it. And that water tower has 6 or 8 vents on it because it's gotta come out in a hurry. So,
Yeah.
yeah, venting is really important, and you cannot paint over your vent, and you should probably have one if you don't have a vent on your tower.
So moving to kind of wrapping up,
Yeah.
we had a lot of information now on water towers and assessing them and what municipals can do to save money, put it in their budget, make sure that we're doing preventative maintenance on all of our assets. Anything in the end here you want to give a shout out or a plug or to kind of wrap it all together at the end here?
Well, I will say, I can give a shout out to myself. If you're interested in a proactive maintenance or learning more about what USG can do for you, listen to this podcast. We're not going to talk about asset management the whole time, but we'll give more insights to that. Reach out to me, find out what more you can do or what we can do to help prevent corrosion and be more proactive in maintenance and basically just mitigate unforeseen costs because there's a lot of costs associated with life cycle. So we can delve into that and find out more. Um, and then also, if you don't know what your asset condition is, we can start there. We can get a baseline assessment done and figure out what your tank needs and where we're at as far as when the coatings need to come off or can it be overcoated, which is a huge thing. You want to stay ahead of it. You don't want to add cost to blasting because that will add hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost to the project. And if you're not thinking of that now and just waiting for the coatings to fail, you're adding cost to the project. That's all you're doing instead of spending money ahead of time to save. So the simple question is, would you spend $1 to save 10? It's a no
Well, I
brainer.
know we've been real happy with you guys and the work that you've done and helping us move along um,
Yeah, it's been a
with
pleasure.
our water towers. So I really appreciate that portion of it. Helps for me as a management. I like the fact that I can budget it. I like the fact that I can kind of spread that cost out. And then when it comes time to rehabilitate one or to make repairs, that money's kind of already then. We've already know how much it's going to cost. The money's already there, and um,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
just helps us. So
Absolutely, you have the protections and the guarantees of what we provide, and you know exactly what your costs are going to be. And when you throw it out to the wind and don't know, it's tough to predict those things. So, good point. And no, it's been a pleasure working with you and your team, and I enjoy um, working with Rock Island and looking forward to getting that next rehab done.
cool. So I kind of wanted to do. I guess I want to kind of do a shout out. So we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. Um, we saw like we saw pretty good numbers of people just for playing around on our first episode. This is actually our second episode, but this is where we kind of got into the weeds of what we're wanting to do with keeping the flow. You know, information for operators and people in the industry to understand more. So I wanted to give a shout out. I'm on Facebook. Um, like I said, we are on Facebook with Keeping the Flow. And one of the groups that I was following was Water Distribution Collection Wastewater Operators Symposium. That's the whole name. And while I was on there, one of the operators, I had a good conversation with him on Facebook. His name was Jamel Woodford, Wofford, Woodford, and he made a comment on this symposium, and I was going to read it here. So, and I made a comment on his comment, and next thing you know, we're kind of going back and forth. Well, come to find out, he's new into the industry, 4 years in the water industry. So I was kind of going back and telling him what keeping the flow was all about. So he was very interested. But anyway, his post was in this industry, we must seek to be like a river instead of a reservoir. A river flows and constantly moves along, while a reservoir water flows into it, but it stays until it is emptied out. We should be like a river and give our wisdom and knowledge to those who are up and coming and learning, not to be like a reservoir and just hold it and it stands stagnant or still. Still waters may run deep, but if it's not flowing and constantly being refreshed, it's not good. Learning is never mastered. And once we think we know a thing or two, we really come to find out we don't know a thing or two. Keep learning, keep growing, add value to other younger generations so that they can invest in those they give knowledge to. So, in other words, keep spreading all this knowledge to these new groups
Exactly.
that are coming up. So I really did like that little thing. He
That's
said it
great.
came from John Maxwell, who was a leadership and character development coach. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I think he became a follower of Keeping the Flow. I saw our number changed on Facebook, so that was good. So
Good.
again, thanks, Chad, for doing this. I think again, just to put it out there with Keeping the Flow here, I think this is a great opportunity uh, to put more knowledge out there to operations and industry both.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be and it's going to be a nice library of things to come back on and say, we can direct people. Hey, as we talk more and say, if you have this issue, go to episode 13 or whatever, and be a resource, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm gonna enjoy the ride, and hopefully can bring out and what you said is we won't run out of topics. There's no way. And just provide as much as we can and just have fun doing it. It's gonna be great.
All right. So thanks. And our next episode, we're looking at communication in the water world. So that's a very good topic. I think that some of us have lost that ability to communicate effectively. So it'll be interesting to see where that conversation goes. So again, thanks for everybody for listening and supporting us, keeping the flow. Find us at LinkedIn, Facebook, and then our we put
Spotify.
the podcast on
Spotify.
Spotify.
Yes,
So
sir.
check us out. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.